Night two, we sort of, there was maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes tops of basic information about what your mission is, where your characters come from, and how you all ended up being together. It's all pretty rapid. You go through a couple, in this mission, which is called Through the Crystal Caves and takes place largely in the Feywild. I think it's Crystal Caves. I'll modify that if I need to. But it takes place mostly in the Feywild, which is where elves and other mystical creatures are from. And actually, about half our table ended up being elves. Actually, three of us were elves, and the last one is a dwarf. So I'm not sure how that'll play out. It seems to me that our characters would probably have some advanced knowledge about the place that we're all investigating. But so far, it hasn't much affected anything. So basically, the setup was pretty rapid. We got through talking to some local leaders, figuring out what's going on, and then after that, we ended up in combat, fighting some little green dudes called Zyvorts. Blue and green. And they were a pretty easy battle. It sort of let us get an idea of how to play our characters and sort of just get started on dice rolling. Now, combat's pretty simple. Combat, basically for any attack, you use a d20, and you add what's called your attack bonus. And actually, I still haven't fully figured out where that number comes from. I understand that it's a combination of math using some of your skills, but I'm not 100% on where that's coming from. But I've tried debating it with the Dungeon Master a number of times and figuring out, based on some of the stuff that I've read online, what it's from. And the answer that I keep on getting is basically just use the attack bonus and don't worry about it too much. So I'm still going to look that up later because curiosity is probably my greatest curse. So, you roll a 20. And whatever it comes up as is, plus your attack bonus, is what they compare to the defense that it uses. Now, I made up, to make it a little easier, these attack cards, power cards actually, and each one tells you all the information that you need to know to actually play that ability. I'm not going to get too deep into the rules, but basically what we did is we fought these Zyvorts and we used some of our really basic abilities, and we learned pretty quickly how to play our characters. Now, when you do play your characters, in combat anyway, you use models, and me and Brandy, some of the guys actually just borrow models for the night from the Dungeon Master, but me and Brandy both got our own guys. There's Brandy's druid, and you buy them and they're little pewter models, and you paint them, and sometimes they're plastic models. I think some might even be lead or cadmium or something, and that's my barbarian. He is an elf barbarian, so he's wiry. And he has a magical sword, and actually so does Brandy. Although Brandy only has her magic sword and her spells, and I have my magic sword and an additional sword in case I get knocked out and need to make use of that when my magic sword is unsummoned. Which is more or less, just extra information. You can play it to whatever extent you want. You can play it pure tactical, or you can play it much more role-playing and sort of making up all this backstory and shit. I went about halfway. I made up some backstory, and because honestly, it's just a six. Well, I think it's a couple of week. It's a couple of month thing in the end. I think it runs till November, it runs from the end of November to I think sometime in February. So it's not a very long thing, and plus it's only one night a week. It's Wednesdays. I should have mentioned that originally, and. So it was pretty easy, and then you talk to a couple more people, and then you do some rolls, some 20-sided die rolls to figure things out. For combat, actually, what you do first is you roll to attack, and then you roll for damage. And usually rolling for damage uses a variety of different types of dice. You have your 4-sided die sometimes, which is always red on the top. It turns out that every corner has the same numbers on it. So you got 3, 3, 3. And that's that entire top of the pyramid. So you always read the 4-sided die from the top. And it'll always, no matter what side of it you're looking at, the top will always be the same number. Let's see. Sometimes you roll a 10-sided die, which is sort of this funky looking thing. Sometimes for damage you gotta do a, where's it at? 8-sided die. That's what I use the most. Usually I use 2 or 3 8-sided dies to do my damage. And you got a 12, which doesn't seem to be very popular. And also, occasionally, oddly enough, the most popular die on the planet, the 6-sided, is hardly ever used in this game, it seems. And that's what you roll to do your damage. And then it's sort of it adds up. It's cumulative to defeat creatures or for creatures to defeat you. And actually, night 2, that's what happened. Night 2, we got into these caves, and so we're fighting these guys, and we're all of a sudden out of these caves start coming these echo monsters. So the echo monsters come after us, and they're incredibly powerful. One of them actually summons these little heads, and every round these heads do echo damage to you. And then the monsters themselves do damage, and one of them, actually, a secondary monster came out when we got really close to killing the echo monster, but actually by then we were all really close to dead. Another monster comes out that's sort of this goop, and it's sort of gooping around. Blah, blah, blah. A lot of it's imagination based. You have these models which help you out, and you have sort of this grid, this board that you play on. It's not dissimilar from any other board game, but a lot of it's imagination based on what the game master tells you, and a lot of times what you tell him, and what you all make up around the table. There's a lot of joking, a lot of joviality. And it's mostly imagination based. So this goop starts coming out, and I run after him because by then, we're all in pretty bad shape, and none of us are gonna last much longer. So we pretty much just go after him and leave the echo monster for Brandy to finish off with her spells, which actually she got really close to doing, and the three of us just about managed to kill the echo monster, but unfortunately the dwarf, who is also our healer, our cleric, got knocked out, and then shortly thereafter the other elf got knocked out, and then I got knocked out, and finally Brandy, and actually our entire party got killed. Since we still had about an hour left of the night, the guy said, well, the dungeon master said, well, we can just take off 4 healing surges from each of you and pretend that you survived and healed. And healing surges are actually kind of your second chance. They're your extra lives if you're a video game player. And you get a certain amount based on what type of character you are. But basically that number knocked off, and also the number that we had lost actually in combat, meant that all of us only have 1 left going forward. Which is lucky that night 3, or technically night 4, game night 3, the monsters were much easier to fight. Actually, those were just some mud monsters, and there ended up being 3 of them, and we found out pretty quickly that as long as we knocked them out quickly, more didn't come. For a while there, they kept on showing up, but then as we dealt more and more damage, as we got better and better at playing our characters, we were able to run through that pretty rapidly, and then get to another role-playing situation where the game finally ended. Now, the problem with encounters in general is that the role-playing part is a little less than some players might be used to. So a lot of people are expecting a lot more from it that just isn't there. So people are examining these rooms and these various pieces of furniture and just like sifting through couches for any little bit of information they can get. And it takes a little while to realize that there's just not that much information available in this game. In this version of the game. So after you get that, a lot of it is just fluff. A lot of what the dungeon master, game master is telling you is unnecessary for actual play and is just there for your personal enjoyment. Then it gets a lot easier. And also once you learn how to play your character a little better. Now, next week, actually, it seems that our place is actually a little bit behind because the website will actually report to you what happened in the last missions. It'll keep a running tally. The Dungeons & Dragons website keeps a running tally of everything that's happened in-game because it should be happening simultaneously across the country, so there shouldn't be any spoilers. Unfortunately, I think we're about a night behind. So we actually, I read the last synopsis, and I know a little bit more about the next mission than I should. Fortunately, I'll probably forget all of it by then because I just don't retain things that I don't bother to retain. It's like people's names from high school. I don't remember most of them. Some of them, yes. Most of them, not so much. Faces I'm much better at. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So, one other thing about D&D encounters. You can play with these cards. They're called fortune cards. And there's information online about how to make a deck of them. But basically, it's any multiple of 10, so 10, 20, 30, 40 cards, whatever. And for every 10 cards that are in your deck, you need 3 of each type. There are attack, defense, and tactic cards, and they each do different things. For encounters, I'd suggest going with no more than 10 cards in your deck, just because you don't want to spend a fortune on this, and they're not going to be that handy. Although they did save my ass once. The Mudmen in Night 3 come after you and try to absorb you. And they absorbed Brandy. They absorbed Brandy twice, actually. And one of them almost absorbed me. But I used... He critical attacked me. When you roll a 20, which is pretty awesome, when anybody rolls a 20, even the monsters, on the 20-sided die, they call it a critical hit, and they do maximum damage. So you don't have to roll for it, it's just the maximum damage you could have possibly done. So if your damage for that attack is 1d10 plus 5, normally you'd roll 1d10 die and then add 5 to it, and that's how much damage you do to the guy. But because you're critical, then you just do straight up 10, because that's the max that you could have done on that die roll, plus your modifier. So in this case, it would be 15, which actually Brandy managed to do once, and this Mudman managed to do against me once. And he was going to absorb me then, but then I had this card, this fortune card, that said that I got a free attack against anybody who criticals on me. So I was able to actually roll a successful hit and not only push him off, but kill him. So that kind of saved me, and also in many ways saved the party, because Brandy was already absorbed, so she wasn't gonna, she was just gonna be stuck in there taking damage. And the other two guys were in pretty bad shape. The cleric was just routinely healing me because I kept on getting hit. And actually I kept on getting immobilized, so there wasn't much I could do. So he just kept on healing me, and more or less I just took damage for the entire party and let everybody else do their attacks and sort of chip away at the enemies until we eventually won. So in many ways, the fortune cards actually saved me. I thought that they were just a gimmick at first, maybe a way to make a couple extra bucks off the players, but in the end they actually turned out to be quite useful. So, I guess this will be my first video of D&D Encounters Talk. I hope it was moderately entertaining. Not too much backstory. In the future, I'm just going to do much shorter video blogs, just talking about what happened in the nights. I'll probably do maybe 3 nights at a time, just to consolidate. This seems to have worked pretty well. I'll probably have to break this apart into maybe 2 or 3 videos to get it to fit on YouTube, because it turns out they have a maximum size. So, for Random Tandem, I am Tom D, aka Will B. Keep an eye on our website, randomtandem.com, and you can also find our podcast there, or on iTunes with a search of Random Tandem. And you can always check our Twitters, which are linked there, or Brandy's is Bhakti Rose. I believe that's BHKTI Rose, ROSE. And I am Worser Thoughts, spelled the way it sounds, WORSERTHOUGHT. It's funny how you can't spell so well in your head as you can when you're just writing it. And this has been Dungeons & Dragons Talk number 1. See ya!